Yes, I'm using my teacher voice.
I've seen this before.
It is so nice to see so many people here this afternoon. I think this is going to be a very interesting presentation about some exciting work that was done down on Cape Jellison last fall. Bock has done more than one dig down on the Cape, and this is, I guess, the first you've been
this is.
really letting out any information.
We've been working on this for a couple of years now, and it's been all preliminary. I haven't had enough data really to put out there and be sure of what I was saying. We have it now, and there will be a formal report in August due out, and so you'll get a copy here. But this is a mid-18th century military site that was built on Cape Jellison by Governor Pownall. Fort Pownall, of course, is on the state park on Fort Point. Anyone knows about that, but since I've moved here 10 years ago, I've been hearing about these readouts, and there were two of them, and they're outside fortification positions, if you can think of that. They were built quickly, they were staffed, and they did have armaments in them. And there was one built, if you can imagine Cape Jellison. Those who don't know Cape Jellison might not know what I'm talking about, but I'll be showing it on maps here. But there were two built. One was built on what's now private property, and that's the first redoubt that was built initially. Then the second one was built to the same design as the first. That's on state park property, about a quarter mile, half mile from the fort itself. I have a pretty good idea where that is, and actually, in the future, getting the right permits, I would like to find that, because that's just identified and flag it, so it's not harmed by any park improvements, because it's near the road. This picture here is of the log redoubt number 2, and this is from Lieutenant Small, who was a surveyor for the expedition. It's May 1759 is the date of this map. And looks like has an open side, and it has some angles and such. We really don't know if this is an accurate depiction, because this map was made before the redoubt was actually built. It was being surveyed in. But it probably is, because his depiction of the fort is pretty accurate. So this is the second redoubt that's on state park property. The first redoubt, the first one to be built, is on private property, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And now no one's going to see me unless you're over here until the end of the talk, so I'm going to go disappear. And there's the introduction. I'm going to give a little brief history just to brush up real quick, and then we'll get into the investigation. This is Fort Necessity in western Pennsylvania. It marks the start of the French and Indian War, 1754. And basically it didn't start well there was a lot of defeats for the British forces. The young colonel on the horse in command of these troops, you might recognize his name, is George Washington. Oh. If you attention to the screen. By 1759, the French were on their heels, and the English were basically turning the corner in the conflict, and there were more and more British victories against the French, and the French were being pushed back deeper and deeper into what's now Canada. And the conception of Fort Pownall was first brought out in 1756. But it was Governor Pownall, who was the governor of Massachusetts, which this was part of Massachusetts colony at the time, that actually oversaw the construction of the fort. And this is his words in February, and basically he's pushing that all the areas that for resupply to the French in the west have been plugged, all the water routes, except for the Penobscot. And I'm going to spend just a little bit of time, a couple minutes on this map, because this is kind of important. This map is a survey map of a Lieutenant Small, who was the surveyor for the expedition and for the undertaking of the Fort Pownall. And what you can see here is kind of kind of a rough map, but if you look up here, you see Cape Jellison, and then you have Belfast area here, and you come down into here, and right here is where Thomaston is today. And that fort was existing. That was Fort St. George's, and the expedition started at Fort St. George's in May of 1759. So from Fort George's at that point, some 300, almost 300 men marched land route up into what is now Belfast to meet up with Governor Pownall's fleet. And Governor Pownall's fleet was several ships, including brick barges, lumber barges, 3 gunships, including the King George, which was a 20-gun frigate. That was the flagship of the fleet coming up. So they're coming up in force to build the fort. You have to understand at this point, north and east of Thomaston was completely a no-go zone. There was no colonization, no British colonization. The French were pretty much expelled at this point, but this was Penobscot territory, and the British, the New England colonization did not go north of Thomaston until this very point. So they were coming into, the area was known and obviously surveyed, but it was not at all colonized, so they had no idea what they were going to come across. They were coming up in force. And this route coming up along here was surveyed by the surveyor that made the map, and you can kind of see they're going over Camden Hills right here, okay, and they're coming in, and right here is the Duck Trap River, and they're crossing the Duck Trap it's kind of a hard crossing in May, but they did it, and they came up pretty much where Route 1 is, up the Passagewaukeag, Passagewaukeag, I always stumble on that river in Belfast. They went to the headwaters and came back down this way, just north of Searsport, and on to Cape Jellison. So, here's the same map, and what we're looking at here is Cape Jellison itself. The troops met up with a fleet in Belfast, which is right in here. From there they proceeded and sailed in to what's now Grant's Cove and landed in mass at Grant's Cove. And the first place that they secured was the carrying place. You can see it listed here, carrying place. Not really clear where it is, but it's in the neck of Cape Jellison. And when they reached the carrying place, Governor Pownall ordered, and we're really lucky because we have the complete accounts from Governor Pownall's own hand documenting this expedition, and it actually is an open source. If you ever want to find it, it's in the Collections of Maine Historical Society, number 5, 1857, and it's been printed in that, so it's on the web. You can read the whole thing. But Governor Pownall landed, and he ordered that Brigadier Puebble, which was in command of the men, put 40 men out at the carrying place the next morning with 20 axes. So they were taking turns working. The carrying place, they wanted to clear a road 1 rod wide from side to side. That was May 18th. On the 19th, he came to shore, and he saw that the road was done, and he ordered Captain Bean to build a log redoubt according to the forms I gave him, with a guard room in it for an officer and 25 men. Fairly, sizable building. And he placed those orders in. Captain Bean had a contingent of 70 men under his command, and so 70 men can do a lot of work. Then he says the next day he came back, and on the 20th visited post, the carrying place, found Lieutenant Puebble had finished the redoubt and guardhouse which Captain Bean began. Lieutenant Puebble, I believe, is Brigadier Puebble's son.
Yeah.
So,
Both his sons were up there.
Okay, thank you.
Both lieutenants.
I think this indicates that they're throwing more men at this endeavor. and probably throwing everybody they are. So basically, in 2 days, they cleared the carrying place. And just so I can, just to recap, the carrying place was a Native American carrying ground where the Penobscot and other people would canoe down and pull in at the neck of the Cape and carry over to Mill Pond and avoid having to go around the bad currents and all this distance. It took a lot off the travel, and then they could just hug the coast and travel on their journeys. And this carrying place probably was used for a long time, and that was my theory at the time. We found evidence actually that it was. But at the time, I'm looking, I see all this information, I'm reading all this information. So logically what I should be looking for is a carrying place. If I can find the Native American carrying place, then I should have, if it's still there, big if, may have a chance of finding evidence of the Redoubt. How do you find a Native American carrying place? Well, it's a funnel. It would be a place where people would gather over a long period of time, very small groups probably, a canoe full or several canoes, and you'd expect to have domestic activities happening. You don't really expect a village there, but you'd expect to see a lot of sites of domestic activities along the shoreline of the carrying place. So that's kind of was my research goal early on, is to look for that. Let's go back one slide, and I have one, I forgot to mention that Redoubt number 1 was built in a carrying place. Governor Pownall then, after this redoubt is completed, orders that a second redoubt be built at the point itself, at the narrowest part, and actually you can see a line across this map where the redoubt would have been built. Only after these 2 redoubts were built did the fort begin. And we know that the Governor Pownall's expedition is coming up with brick barges, lumber barges. In fact, he was held up for several weeks in Falmouth waiting for the lumber to be sawed for the blockhouse of the fort and the floorboards. This was all prefabricated.
The whole fort was prefabricated and set up and then torn down.
Yes. Well, if the fort is prefabricated, the blockhouse, building the redoubt with a guard room in one day stands to reason that he planned these 2 redoubts. The redoubt buildings were most likely fabricated also. So they were able to come in, put the walls up of the redoubt fortification, and put the guardhouse in that, a prefabricated building. And that would make the most sense. And there's Fort Pownall there on Fort Point State Park.
That's that's loosely, that's what was done after the fact by Joseph Plum Martin, who never saw the fort.
Yes.
There are 2 plats that show what the fort was going to be built like and what it was prefabricated like.
Yes.
You've seen both of those.
Yes.
That's the wrong picture.
Okay. It's a romantic picture of the time. This is a 1764 map of Governor Bernard. Was ordered, and he was ordered, or Governor Bernard ordered in 1764 to build a road between the 2 forts, Fort St. George's and Thomaston, and Fort Pownall and Fort Point. And this depicts the road, and what you have is part of this road being used earlier in 1759 by Pownall Brigadier Preble, marching his troops up. And this is a footpath used for foot traffic only, it says, over the mountains. But they surveyed the road along this side of the mountain, so hugging the coast, kind of where Route 1 is. And at this point here, they shoot up and inland and shoot west. Why are they doing this? And then come up around, this is Belfast, come up around the river, the Passamaquoddy River, thank you. And then come shooting down through to Cape Jellison. What's happening here is earlier they forded the Duck Trap River, and they're avoiding that. So they want to get around the Duck Trap River. So at Lincolnville Beach, which is right here, they're pushing up inland, and then once you get up past the Duck Trap River, you run into Pitcher Pond. So they have to get around Pitcher Pond. And what this is basically running the road, and I think it's pretty much on Shore Road at Lincolnville Beach, then Slab City Road, then Route 52 around Pitcher Pond. This is the old Forts Road. And this is kind of significant because this is the very first road in the region that was built. And this deserves a paper in itself, and I'm going to be doing work in years to come on this road. I think this is fascinating because once this road was done and in 1764, although it probably changed shortly after, this was the access to the interior. So this is when the interior was settled, once this road went in and the farm started pushing back more. The Forts Road travels north of Searsport, maybe where the old county road is, just north of Searsport. And then at Sears Island, it comes down, and then that's about Route 1, and then comes around Cape Jellison into Fort Point, passing the two readouts. Cape Jellison Road, if you travel Cape Jellison and go to the state park and go on the east side of Cape Jellison, you are on the Forts Road. That's a remnant of the original road that was built in the region, the very first road. And this redoubt is really important. The whole, the fort being put in is very important because it had two goals. Of course, one goal was to seal the water from French resupply. The other goal is to give a staging ground for the British colonization into Penobscot River, down east into Acadia. So this is the very moment that Acadia is open to New England settlement. And it is actually the very moment that the Penobscots are disenfranchised and this land is no longer their land to travel freely on. So a lot of stuff is happening right at this point. And Redoubt number 1, being the first structure built initially, is the very first moment that New England British forces build a structure to open the area up to colonization. So it's a lot of firsts. It's a pretty interesting site. So, carrying place. Okay, let's find a carrying place. So when I first started looking for this, I turned to Faustina Hitchborn and her historical sketches of Stockton Springs, and it's very flowery. Few can realize that less than 200 years ago, the noble red men of the Tarantine tribe plied and paddled their light canoes along the Grand Penobscot, unvexed and undisturbed from the source to the mouth, making a carrying ground at the narrow neck of land between what is now Louder's Brook and Mill Pond on their journey to territory farther west. Louder's Brook. I thought that, well, there's Louder's Brook at Jeff Davis's house. That's a good place to start. And that's where we started. Ryan helping us out. Several other people helped us out on this. And this was a very, very warm Thanksgiving Day weekend in 2012. It was wonderful. It's like, hey, Jeff Davis, can we dig in your yard? And he's like, sure. We put a series of test pits. We put about 12 test pits in several places along either side of Louder Brook. The place is blown out. We not only didn't find any Native American material, we didn't find any 19th century field scatter, which you'd expect to find in fields everywhere in New England, near farmhouses. My theory was this area was pushed out and re-landscaped, maybe having to do with the railroads, what have you, in the 20th century. And if there was anything there, it was gone. And so we struck out.
He was very disappointed, by the way.
There's a lot of disappointment, but with that disappointment came an opportunity. So I'm writing up this report about what we did and finding nothing. It's going to be a quick 4-pager. But then in doing a little bit more reading of historical sketch of Stockton Springs, I came across this mention of the Dickey House. And William Dickey and his wife Eleanor Dickey moved here from Londonderry or Windham, New Hampshire in 1785, settling at Louder's Brook on the neck of Cape Jellison. Well, the Dickey House is quite a distance from the actual outlet of Louder's Brook. And then I came to realization, oh my goodness, Louder's Brook is a area. It's not just the brook. And I thought I was really smart about this, and I mentioned it to Danny Harrison, and he's like, well, yeah. There was a louder school, a louder...
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well. But I did find it out. And this is a 1759 map of Waldo County showing the Dickey House. This is the last map that shows the Dickey House. It was abandoned, and apparently abandoned to fall down in its cellar hole sometime in the 1860s. I'm not really sure the exact date. Maybe some of you know. If anyone has any information, that would be interesting. But sometime in 1860s, the Dickey House was abandoned. So, which is kind of interesting, because there shouldn't be. The archaeology should stop at around 1860, so you shouldn't have a lot of modern trash there. I figured this is a good place to look, right around where the Dickey House is. So, I went back to researching Governor Pownall's accounts, and he mentions that he came aboard again after dinner, sent Pueblo to see carrying ground. He reported to me that it was not more than 80 rods across. And remember, on his other counts, he says he could see water to water when the carrying ground was initially cleared before the redoubt was built. And a rod is a measurement. Rods, you kind of have to work with it, because at times they use different measurements with rods. But this was an official British undertaking. So I feel really confident that the statute rod under English Parliamentary Statute of 1592 was the official length of measure, equaling exactly 5.5 rods or 16.5 feet. So if I draw a line on Google Earth from water to water, it should not be more than 440 yards. And this line here is 438 yards right across.
Wow.
And it's really the only place it can go. Louder Brook bothered me because the bank here was being cut by erosion, and the land was at one point, you can actually see it here on the low tide, they lost probably 100 feet, 150 feet just in the last 100 years. This is being chowdered, and it's also a very steep bank. So if you're going to make a carrying ground up here, the guys would have to climb up this 3-meter high bank with a canoe. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You come around this curve, there's no erosion going on, not presently, and it's a gentle little bank, less than a meter. You can step right up, bring your canoe up. It really makes a good place for a carrying ground. So I'm looking at other maps. This is a 1776 De Beers map. That was a British expedition. Beautiful. He mapped the entire coast. After the French-Canadian War, the British spent a lot of money trying to figure out, okay, let's really know what our territory is. And they spent all this money, and they did these expeditions. So these wonderful maps that were made during this time. This one was made in 1776, and we know it was made from a 1774 survey. And so it shows some houses here and some buildings on the point. He only surveyed the houses he could see from the water. He didn't go into the interior, so this doesn't... Cape Jellison might have been developed more, but we know at least there's some buildings going on here and here. This is the carrying place, and this one house right here, farther north, above the other one, is the site of the Dickey's house. In fact, if you put a Google Earth on it, it lines right up. There's a second house right next to it. I'm not sure exactly where that is. I don't know who's living here in 1774. I have an idea who might be. I have a working hypothesis, but I don't have a lot map pre-revolutionary. But there's a mention of Colson's, Hattaville and Josiah Colson. And they apparently subdivided a 100-acre lot into 2/3 and 1/3, and each lot had buildings and improvements. Well, that's a good candidate, so it could be a Colson.
Their property was farther up around.
Well, perhaps. And this area here is showing development and buildings that may be associated with Fort Pownall. The fort was destroyed in 1775, and by 1776 the fort would no longer be there. So although the fort was probably surveyed in by De Beers, it wasn't on this map because it was by 1776 it was no longer there. But we do know there were several buildings associated with the fort, an officers' quarters and a brick church. There's probably these two buildings right here that remained. In fact, the brick church was used in the Penobscot Bay expedition as a field hospital by the Continental Forces. And then you have another house right in here, which I'm not exactly sure the location of that. So what's really interesting about this map is we're seeing a carrying place, that there's a building there before the Dickies moved there in 1785, according to Hitchborn. I'm not sure if 1785 is the right date. It might be a little bit later, but I think the Dickies were one of the first post-revolutionary settlers in the area. So this is the area that we're talking about. This is the site area. And we know where the Dickies house is. It's right here. It's filled in. And there's the Dickey house. The Dickey pump, some people might realize, was the old well. It was right here on the side of the road. Okay, so we know where the house is. We know where the well is. We know that somewhere along this line, almost going through the Dickey house, is the carrying place. Where exactly is it? So in 2013, exactly a year after we initially tested Jeff Davis's property at Louder Brook, we got permission from this property owner here, Susan Char, who gratefully, it was very nice and generous and let us dig up her backyard. And we're testing these. Our testing strategy is a series of small test pits, square, 50 centimeters by 50 centimeter pits, about a foot and a half. We run a transect and we place these pits on regular intervals, and I'm running them at 5 meters. The test pits are dug straight walls down so you get a good sample. All the soil from the test pits are screened, so any material is kept. Even if it's modern material, we keep everything because it's all important to try to figure out if there's disturbance and what have you. Doing this too, finding artifacts are of course important, that's the evidence, but we're also making note of the soil, and if the soil looks disturbed, if the soil looks intact. I asked some friends to come up, one of which traveled 5 hours to get here, and it was nasty. It was wet, silty, poorly drained, and we didn't find anything in 5 test pits. And so I'm kind of thinking, wow, strike number 2. On top of that, I asked these people to come all the way up here, good friends of mine that I exploit on a regular basis. And while we were starting to get a little bit discouraged, David and Sharon Fons, who live in this property, own this lot. He was out moving loam around with his tractor. And I know David a little bit just in passing, but he didn't really know me that well. So I walked up and asked, hey, we're doing testing here, and how would you like your property to be dug up? And, you know, he was fantastic. It was unbelievable. So he's like, yeah, do whatever you want, wherever you want. I said, wow, wherever you want. Well, let's forget about finding Native American evidence. Let's just go for broke and test up where you can see water to water if this was clear. So this is the height of land. This is really a nice spot. It dips down a little bit here, it dips down a little bit there. The height of land is right here. There's also this unusual berm, and you can actually see it in Google Earth. And this is this berm that goes across north-south. We have no idea what that is. David didn't know what it was. He always remembered it being there and always wondered what it was, didn't know. And we know where the Dickey house is. So we didn't want to really mess with the Dickey house because that just would be overwhelming. So we decided to investigate this berm. And while the crew was setting up, I was talking to David, and he was just giving me a wealth of information. Things that just really sounded optimistic to me. For instance, a number of years ago, he found a very small cannonball on the shoreline. And this cannonball was smaller than a baseball. I'm like, about a pound? He said, yeah, it weighed about a pound. There's historical accounts of Governor Pownall. He fortified these defenses with swivel guns, 1-pound swivel guns. You can just imagine them sighting in the swivel gun. What they're doing is they're getting the fort established, and they're getting ready for some kind of counterattack by the French coming into Grant's Cove, so they want to be able to defend against that. That's great. I mean, that's as good as it gets. And then he came up with some other information. He gave us information about the Dickey's house. He thinks the Dickey's house was abandoned around 1860, maybe a little bit after. He's the one who gave me the information that it wasn't burned, it fell in. The cellar hole was there for a long time. In fact, when he was a little boy, people used to dig around the cellar hole to look for gold because there's a story of an Indian trading post being on the site of the Dickey house. And then the wheels started to turn. Governor Pownall, after he builds the fort and abandoned, the second commander is Colonel Galthwaite. Early on in the fort's use, there was a truck house in the fort, and the truck house is a official licensed post for trading, mainly with Native Americans, but also trade in general. But it would be set up there for Native American trade, furs and other commodities coming down the river. And it was in the fort. And Galthwaite complains that he doesn't like Indians coming in and out of the fort. He doesn't think that's good for security or what have you. And he said he wanted to move the truck house away, but nearby the fort. He doesn't say where, but boy, if I was going to put a truck house to trade with Native Americans, it would be right on a carrying place where they'd be traveling anyway. So this is getting more and more interesting. So that's what it looked like in October of 2013, a beautiful warm October day. And Sharon Fonce came out with hot peanut butter fudge. It was wonderful. But anyway, I digress. So we're putting test transects, and you can see the berm in the back. You can see up front, this is settling in on a continuous basis, and David Fonce is filling this in. This is the Dickey house. And you can still kind of see it with fill. And here's the area that's being tested. This is David Fonce's house. This is Susan Char's house. This is the boundary of the lot. This is the berm, roughly. And these are test pits. These are the 50 by 50 centimeter test pits. And we put 11 of them in. We stayed away from the Dickey's house. And right in this area, we found some interesting material. We tested outside of this area. We also found some possible Native American material out away to the east of the berm. Ceramics are really important to historic archaeology because there's a definitive manufacture date on these ceramics, and you can really pinpoint down what type of ceramic is being made at what exact time. So when you find a collection of them, it helps you date a site. There's always a chance that someone kept the odd grandmother Betsy's great-great-grandmother's teacup and throw all the date off. But that would be an anomaly. If you get a big enough sample, you can really get a grasp for the time period by looking at the ceramics. And these are ceramics associated with a Dickey homestead, which you'd expect to find. We did find a lot of them. Most of the stuff was Dickey, no surprise there. Pearlwares, this is a nice shell-edged pearlware, some nice machine-turned pearlware. Early 19th century or 1800. And then you get this granite ware, which dates around the time of the Civil War, maybe a little bit before. Fits good. We didn't find any modern material. Lovely, I like that. It cuts the sample size down. On top of the Dickey material, we found ceramics that did not fit with a 1790 homestead. And
you mean on top in addition to?
In addition, not in stratigraphy,
Not
but in addition.
stratigraphy-wise,
Okay,
so
yeah.
just, sorry.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
Also, as well as the Dickey
Yeah.
material, thank you. We did not find.
So it would be found below, is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Yeah, beneath.
Unfortunately, this material was found in what's known as a plow zone, an area that's plowed up, so it was all mixed. So that's what we were going with initially. It was all mixed, but we're dating the ceramics. This is white English stoneware. This material dates manufacture date from 1720 to about 1770. And this is a part of a pitcher pitcher handle, or perhaps a teapot handle. You can see this would be attached to the body. This would be the very top part. It would then come down and connect. This is a molded salt glaze stoneware piece, and it's a design that was pretty common. It was called dot diaper basket, and that's really the name of it. This is a dot diaper basket design English stoneware that was recovered from Fort Pownall. Because of Sandra Olson's report in 1984, reviewing the work of Hadlock, Wendell Hadlock, in the 60s, of his excavation at Fort Pownall itself, we had pictures that we could compare material, and that was so helpful to have this. And as we started to find stuff, we could make a correlation with the proper Fort Pownall itself, which is a mile away from this Redoubt. So that was very optimistic finding that. And we found other material too that dates to the mid-18th century. We also found, like I said, some evidence of Native American occupation. This is a burnt piece of calcined bone. That's an artifact. It's a pointed bone. Is it a projectile point fragment? It's possible. Some type of pointed tool, but it was actually worked into a point, burned. Otherwise, bone would have been long gone after 250 years. But it was burned in a fire pit and preserved. So we found some, and we also found some stone chippings, flakes from tool making. We also found some broken up pieces of rock that were tool stone, a rock called a rhyolite, which is very hard but very fine grain, a stone that would be used for making tools. So we found some Native American activity going on around here also. And it was very positive, and this is another Google Earth image, and just gives you an overview again. There's the berm, it really shows. Dickey House right here. We have evidence of apple orchard. You can see the rows of the old rows that used to be apple orchards. In fact, some of the trees are still there. This is telling us that this has not been messed with since the Dickeys abandoned their house. This is right in between two modern houses. You got this 100-foot swath of undisturbed land. So this made me really happy, and one of the people that came to help me dig in 2013, his name is Garrett Evans, he drove 5 hours to help me, called me one day when I'm like, and he's like, hey, did you look at Google Earth? And I'm like, no. He said, well, turn it on. And he's like, what's up with that rock clearing?
Yeah.
Boy, that jumps out. So proud of myself finding the carrying place through research. And look at that. There it is. This is a rock clearing, 40 feet wide, out, matches right up with the line of the carrying place.
Wow.
So you have to understand that we put months and months of research into finding this, and then Garrett calls and says,
Hey, what's up with that rock clearing?
have you looked at Google Earth?
What's significant about this rock clearing is Pownall specifically mentions whaleboats. He's supplying, in fact, he brought the whaleboats all the way up with him with the fleet, and he's moving troops and supplies from ship to shore using these whaleboats. And I imagine these whaleboats are pretty big, unruly things. You need first thing you would do before you'd even clear is you need to make a clearing, a landing clearing place, a rock clearing landing beach. And this next picture really shows it. And this was taken in March. With Garrett came up and took a picture with his. He brought a drone up, and we took some pictures last March. That is beautiful, and it points right to the closest point of Mill Pond, right over the site.
Yeah.
So they would have done that at low tide?
Yeah, they probably would have done it at low tide, cleared it out as much best they can. It would have been a big endeavor,
Yeah.
but you know they're working. If you
Pickaxes and stuff to go?
probably with block and tackle and rope, I would guess. But you know, you throw 150 men at something, you can get a lot done, or have a lot of problems. Depends on the men. But
Dynamited the rocks in 1918.
this is a powder horn from Thomas Simons, dated 1761. This artifact was, I was just made aware of this Thursday. And the historic archaeologist of Maine, of the commission, Historical Preservation Commission, Leith Smith, called me up and said, I looked at this powder horn. It was the archaeologist up in Orono, Gretchen Faulkner, and he wasn't sure of the exact provenience, whether this is a museum piece or what, but I got permission to show this. I can't cite it properly yet because, like I said, I just saw this. Fantastic. He was a soldier at Fort Pownall, and this powder horn is dated 1761. There is Fort Pownall. There's the blockhouse. It says right here, Fort Pownall.
Cheers.
This beautiful ship here with the flags and the decked out is probably Pownall's flagship, the King George, which was mentioned. So we have the King George coming in, and right here, you can barely see it in that shot. There's your whaleboat. This is a picture that might be depicting the initial landing on Cape Jellison. It was remarkable. The whaleboat has a sail. I didn't expect that. These things were huge. And so, yes, you'd need a significant landing beach. And to think that landing beach is, for 250 years, it hasn't been messed with. 250 years plus. We readdressed this site in November of 2014. Now, this is a year later, so 2 years since we initially tested Louder Brook at Jeff Davis's house. And we went back and we had a testing strategy to kind of try to define this better. The strategy was threefold. And the first part of the strategy was to address the berm. And we did that by putting trenches in. This trench, we put two of them in. They were 1/2 meter, 1.5 feet by 3 meter, about 9 feet long. And that way you can see the soil stratigraphy. You can see what's going on better than just a little pit. So that was strategy number one. What's going on with the berm? And in one of the trenches, we came across this pit feature, which is on the north side of the berm, close to David Fonce's property line. I didn't know what it was at first. It was deep. It's about 3 feet deep. It was filled in. We only cut half of it with the profile, so it's at least 3 feet wide. Might have been bigger. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know if it was actually associated with the Redoubt. It might have been a Dickey Homestead feature. I wasn't sure. This is a survey map that we did of the site area. It gives you an idea of what it is. This is the lot. There's the berm. There's the footprint of the Dickey house. This is where that feature was found, in the north side or northwest side. We also put the second phase of the strategy of that testing was little test pits everywhere. We wanted to test from the known to the unknown. We knew where we were getting 1750s material. What did it look like away from it? So we tested in David Fonce's. These are all pits in his front yard. We tested on the east side of the berm, and we didn't find a lot. It dropped off a lot, and it was discouraging for the people digging the holes, but it told me a lot. We had the site narrowed down. It was confined. The third leg of the strategy is I wanted to put a couple test pits on the shoreline, just to confirm to myself that if this is a carrying place used by Native Americans, you gotta find Native American artifacts. And not just a flake or two. You should find quite a bit. People are camping here for a long period, over a long period of time, maybe an hour at a time, but over hundreds, maybe thousands of years.
Remember I told you about Priscilla's grandmother?
No,
You don't remember?
no.
She went down, when she was born in the late 1800s. She lived up the road that's not there anymore. She went down, was friends with a little Indian girl. The ladies, they came down, the ladies made camp here, the men carried the canoes across,
Yeah.
went off into the water, Mill Pond, and went fishing, and the ladies gathered reeds to make their baskets around.
At some point, we need to talk, because I want to document that. I have several documentations.
Well, I got the memory right now, but I don't know how long I'll have it.
Okay, hold on. write it down.
I'll write it down.
Write it down. Because I have, and I've actually published earlier, there's been papers with the early investigations of this, and I was amazed by how late this carrying place was being used.
I think that's
This carrying place was
my
being used
grandpa.
well into the 1800s. They might have not been going into Mill Pond because that would have been dammed up with the mill. They might have been going around it, and that would explain why Vern Thompson would told me that. Oh no, they didn't cross there. They crossed up closer to the hill. They probably were at that point because they couldn't use the mill pond. But it's really interesting that you have the continuation of traditional land use strategies of Native American people not well into recorded history. I find that fantastic. And this carrying place, it just shows you the significance of this place for movement, for just access to the region. So we tested down by the water and put 5 shovel test pits, little 50 by 50 pits, and it was really fascinating. This is from one test pit. It doesn't look like a lot, but I was very excited. And these flakes are different stages of weathering. It's a rhyolite. It's a stone that is very sharp and very hard and very fine grained. So when you hit it with a rock, it comes off in a predictable flake, and it keeps a sharp edge. And it's just tool stone. So these are flakes from tool stone here, from sharpening tools or making tools. And these are pieces of Aboriginal ceramic. And this piece right here doesn't look like much on that picture, but it's decorated. You can see the decorations going down. And I had this confirmed by Art Spies at the Historic Preservation Commission in Augusta. And it's a decoration called pseudo-scallop, which pottery changes over time, and it's used by archaeologists to date sites with other things, but pottery is it's called diagnostic. So when you have a certain pattern on a piece of pottery, you can date a site to that time. Pseudo-scallop is on the earlier end of the ceramic period. So this piece of pottery is about 2,000 years old, maybe a little bit older. So the carrying place is being used for at least 2,000 years. Next test pit. 5 meters away, a completely different thing happening. Little tiny bits of ceramic crumbs. I can't really make much out of them because they're so small. You have rhyolite flakes like before. They're smaller, but we also have this red stone. This is Munsungan chert, and it comes from Munsungan Lake, Maine. And Munsungan Lake chert is suggestive of, it's used a lot in what's a time period called the late ceramic. So from late ceramic, it's probably 450, 500 years ago to maybe 1,000 years ago. So this test pit is about 1,000 years younger. 2 different occupations, 2 totally different things, 2 totally different times. Third shovel test pit, 5 meters away. Completely different. You got some Aboriginal ceramics, but you can see rocks in it. It's a very coarse grit temper ceramic, and the grit temper is you got to put temper in ceramic, otherwise it explodes when you fire it. It keeps the clay from exploding. The very harsh grit temper is suggestive of a very early type of ceramic, very first period of ceramic making in the region, or very late. Well, this being found with larger flakes and quartz, which I didn't find in the other test pit. And these quartz are being battered, so instead of just sharpening tools, they're going to the shoreline, finding stone and making tools there. And these 2 artifacts, this is a hand-wrought nail, rose head, and this is a non-ferrous tack, very corroded, possibly brass. If those 2 artifacts go with the rest of them, together it indicates it's a time period called early contact period, 1600s. The Native Americans are still making their ceramics, they're still making their traditional tools, but you have European goods in with those ceramics. So this is showing 3 different shovel test pits. This alone is very significant for finding sites in the region. It's not what we're looking for specifically with this project, but it's perfect. It nails down that there's no doubt that this is the carrying place. Okay, now we come up to last October. And once again, it's raining. we feel really good about this site. We're working closely with the people in the Preservation Commission. We got when I say we, it's not we, it's a collective we, but they got a very small grant to hire a archaeologist that is approved and certified by the state for doing what's known as Phase 3 mitigation work, which is PhD. And he agreed to work volunteer, but there was money involved in the process analysis. It's very expensive to do archaeology. We all worked. We got I said, well, I can get a volunteer crew. I got so many people I can tap into, and please come. So it could have been just been myself and the archaeologist. His name is Rick Morris, and his company is In-Depth Archaeology in Augusta. But he came up, and we did have a response, and we worked for a little bit over a week. And here we are measuring the line and tying it in to the old grid. So when I was doing testing before, I was really careful to keep datum points and keep the grid. So he tied into that grid. Everything is consistent on the map now. So when you lay out the map, you can get the 3 years of work all there. We're laying this transect across the Dickey house. So his strategy, and he's now the principal investigator. I don't have to think about it anymore. I can just dig and have a fun time. His strategy was to put a 1 meter wide, 3 foot wide connected trench, and it's excavated in 1 meter units. So you have provenience, you know where the artifacts are coming from. You connect all those units and make a long trench going north-south, and then another trench connecting to this going east-west. He wanted to cut across the Dickey house, and then cut across what might be the parade grounds and investigate that berm that is east of the Dickey house, and to see if that's actually associated. And that was the plan. We had evidence that suggested, and there's ifs here, if the Redoubt guardhouse was prefabricated, it would have been very beefy, it would have been well built. We had a point on that map in 1774 where someone is living there. We had oral tradition of an Indian trading post being there before that. To me, that suggests continuous use of that building. And then we have the Dickeys coming here in 1785 or slightly after. And some of the first people in here, why not move into an existing building? This was a time of chaos at the Revolutionary War. There were people settled here, and there were homesteads, and there were people with deeds that at the end of the Revolutionary War, their deeds were no longer valid. So they were termed as squatters, and they were cast off their property. And there's not a lot of historical records of those people before the Revolutionary War. The Dickeys, of course, we have a good record of them because they're coming in with a Waldo patent, and it's all nice and orderly at that point. Hitchborn comes up, Robert Hitchborn comes up, buys the Cape, subdividing it. But there were people living on the Cape before Hitchborn came up. And there were people with homesteads on the Cape before Hitchborn came up. And they were cast aside, pushed aside, what have you, or sold out. We really don't know. So
Would they have been considered loyalists?
some of that. There was a lot of that too. Colonel Goldthwait owned all of this. And he tried to, in his heirs, the property was, there's records of the property, some property being taken away from his heirs. So yes, they would have been loyalists. There's a lot of, basically though, the slate was wiped clean and then the money came up once the war was over. Not much has changed.
Yeah.
The theory that I was going with is, wouldn't that be wonderful if this guardhouse was the Dickey house? And there's the transect across, just started across the Dickey house. You can see it darker. That's a darker organic. It turned out to be a fill that was laid on top, but you can see where the Dickey house ends. And this is intact soil. There's no plow zone here. This is to the north of the house. We put test pits here the year before and found the area was very compacted. And my theory was, oh man, it must be the Dickey house dooryard. And it might have been, but it was very compacted. I'm thinking now that if this house was used as the guardhouse, this might have been the parade ground right outside of the house. The house is very small. I mean, we don't know how far it goes this way. We haven't tested it. There's a lot of ifs. but we know how far it goes in a north-south direction, 16 feet.
Oh.
So it's not a big building. Oh, and we got volunteers too. And the volunteers came out. I was so happy to see everybody.
Where's
It
your
was-
shovel?
I was just shaking.
She was shaking. She was finding the good stuff.
Now, did you really work or just pose?
Oh no, she was working.
I was moving and shaking.
Here's the transect. Here's the trench that went east-west. So Cape Jellison Road is out over here. There's the bay, and so there's the Dickey House north-south and east-west. So we did this big L, and it's just getting started here.
Don't forget the bees.
Oh no, don't worry, they're coming. Patience, Diane. Okay, right here is the south edge of. There's a Dickey House, north-south, east-west, right? This is the south edge. This is intact soil, so we know there's no building here. We got this edge here, and we got this feature right here on the edge. There's like a fire. Well, we're not sure. We have to excavate this unit to figure it out. But there's some evidence of hearth or something here. A lot of burnt bone, a lot of burnt material. But right here is what may be a post mold.
Oh, yeah.
And there it is. And these rocks were placed here because they're in disturbed soil. So the rocks were placed around. We've got some bone here, bird bone. And if this is a post mold, well then that would not be at all characteristic of a 1790, circa 1790 homestead. That should be a silled house on a fieldstone foundation. Post mold indicates earlier. And it's in the footprint of the Dickey House. It really is exciting. And so that's some evidence suggesting that this is the building. The very first building built in the region. So, as we start going down deeper across the Dickey House, we get into all this rubble, which is not unexpected. And this is the north-south transect. This is the Dickey House. There's the post mold. So the edge of the house is right here. Inside the edge of the house, you get these three stones here with all these stones in the middle. These stones were placed. And I'm going to go down quickly on this and show you. Harbor Mitchell excavated this. I don't know if he's even here, but he did a fantastic job. And this was his baby. He just tore this apart. There it is. You can see the stones, right? These are mortared only on the inside. So it's a mortar on the inside. This is debris. The stones are coming out. This brick is debris that was piled in there. Maybe the chimney of the Dickey House when they were filling it in. Getting rid of stuff, throwing it into the hole. There it is there. Now that's just looking at it north, and here's those three stones again. Those are going to be your guide. And we're coming down deeper, and you can see the mortar. It's circular. There it is. You can see the circular feature coming out. We're digging it out. Right in the bottom here is a beautiful bottom of part of a redware pot. Right in the bottom. And we're getting material out of this, but it's mixed. It's fill material. So, there it is. All those bricks came out of that hole. Boy, thanks, Harbor. All those rocks on the other side came out of that hole. And you can actually see the circular outline of this feature. Now, what's interesting is this isn't the foundation of the building because the edge of the building is right here. This is inside the building. Yeah, getting there. And there's the three rocks again. Is this really circular or are mine playing tricks? Rick Morris put a unit right in here and it followed over this way. It is a circular piece, and we're going to look at it. This rock was removed from the hole, so that doesn't belong there. That was removed and just placed there because it was too heavy to do anything else with it. And now we're going down to the other side, and now we're facing west. So we're facing Cape Jellison Road, right? What we were looking at is over here. It comes around here, and there's the other end of it, right there. So we didn't go down all the way here. We ran out of time, but we got enough to say, yeah, it's a circular stone feature which is mortared on the inside, 10 feet. Inside a 16-foot building of some kind. The features didn't stop there. This is the east-west trench going down to the water, Cape Jellison right there. And we're going down on it. And let me go back to last slide real quick. Right where Sarah is working, right here, on the very end, here's the berm, you can see it. Right on the edge of the berm, Sarah hit a feature, a pit, a big pit. Matching, the other pit hit the year before, right there. And there it is. Now we're coming down, this is undisturbed ground. So this reddish olive colored ground is what's known as sea soil. That was laid down by the glaciers. That hasn't been moved, never been messed with. So that we know that's disturbed, but we got this fill, this something going on. So obvious. In fact, it's softer. It's all full of woodchuck holes. The woodchucks can't burrow in here because it's compacted gravel till, but they're all in the feature. And we excavated that down, and there it is removed. It's deep with some rocks on the bottom. Those rocks were placed there. So what's the shape of this thing? So we put a unit right in back of it to the north. This is the north looking south. This is the other side. Those are those rocks I pointed out. And it's not a great shot, but it is a circular feature more than 3 feet deep, about 3 foot across, with footer stones on the bottom. And the footer stones were placed there, these flat stones were it's like a pavement of stones on the bottom, supporting some type of footer. And here's the pit feature before this was excavated. So this was taken out to get the outline. We don't know what's to the east of it yet. It hasn't been excavated. But you can see a line going right across from this pit feature. A line continues right there. And we're going to zoom in on that. And there it is. It's a trench. It's a feature, a trench feature. This is intact soil on one end. This is intact soil on the other. It's going on an angle. Woodchuck hole. They're all through this. This goes down to about 2.5 feet deep, and it's rounded on the bottom. It's the log wall. It's a military. I mean, it's not. There's nothing domestic about this feature. So we're thinking. So this wall's coming in from the berm on an angle, kind of going east to west or northeast to southwest. On the other side of this berm, so there it is, it kind of goes like this. On the other side of this berm, we hit that pit feature a year earlier, and we have no idea what's going up with that, but it seems to match this one. So we said, well, if there's another wall matching that, it should be right about here. We figured out where it should be with the angle, and we placed a unit away from it to see if we'd hit a wall, just to see if our if we could predict where a wall was on the other side. And there it is, on the same angle, coming off the other feature. So there's 2 walls we found, and they're coming in at oblique angles, but similar angles, coming in towards the Dickey house. The Dickey house appears to be on the outside of the wall. However, the north side of the Dickey house would be inside of it. So the wall's coming up to the Dickey house, and the Dickey house would be then opening up from the building into the walled area, the compressed area. The berm is a mystery to me. There's something going on with it, but it's not a pit feature. It's not a log feature. It's not a log wall. This is the berm, the north-south berm that started from the beginning of the investigation. The berm is right here, and this is to the west of the berm. We have this organic. It's called a B horizon in soil morphology terms. You have a plow zone here. This area's been plowed. And when you have a high organic concentration that's being decomposed, the minerals leach out and stain the soil underneath it. So what's happening here is definitely something's happening. You have either a log or logs on top of the soil. It's not dug down in. It's on top that's decomposed, causing this B. Or you have a lot of organics being pushed up against the berm, maybe dumping. We don't know yet. But it possibly could be logs that were placed on the surface along this berm to hold this berm up. And we don't know what is east of this berm. It hasn't been tested at all, except for shovel test pits. We don't know where the walls go east towards the bay. Here's an interpretive sign of a log readout, and this is from Fort Ticonderoga. This is a Revolutionary War interpretive sign, and this readout would have been is much more massive than ours, and but it gives you an idea what a log readout is. And Governor Pownall is very specific. There's different types of readouts. There's palisades, there's logs. This is a log readout, and it's designed with logs going down horizontally, right here, and going across, and then vertically, you have these posts that hold the log curtain in. And this really explains what those pit features are. The berm could be a gun step. And if you can imagine 250 years of plowing, moving, the Dickies move in, they don't want a berm there, they spread it out, they get rid of it as best they can. So we're just getting just the evidence, just a hint of it. To have this fall in though, we need to have a wall going north-south, connecting with the other two walls, we know where they are, to the east, to the bay side of this berm. If we find that, well then it's gold. We can start saying, okay, this is shaped this way. We don't know the shape of it yet. Going back to the building structure, and this is the north side of the Dickey house. So this is the compacted area. This is the cistern or round, I say cistern, we don't know what it is, a round 10-foot deep round stone feature that's underneath the house. You can see coming off the house terminates here, and there's some fill that was put on, but there's no plows on. This has never been plowed on the north side because it was on the north side of the house. It was right next to the house. It would have been the yard. It very compacted, and we have evidence, and I feel really confident that we can even tell that this is not only the guardhouse dating to the 1750s, early 1760s. We know where the door was, and the door opened to the north. And because on this test unit that was excavated, which was very thin, we only got probably about maybe 8 inches of soil that was removed, and then it was gone. Then we were through the cultural horizon. We were in the sea soil. About 8 inches. Now that 8 inches right there, we found some wonderful and big pieces of mid-18th century English ceramics. This is called a scratch blue stoneware. Production date 1720, 1760. You're going to be hearing a lot of that. It's a wonderful piece, and it doesn't look like a big piece, but for this site, which has been stepped on and plowed, this is a big piece of ceramic. And JC found that, my daughter, she was so proud of her. And that's from the one unit, the same unit, a bottom of a white salt glazed stoneware English bowl. Pretty big piece, wonderful piece. Bigger than what you normally find. This is coming right outside. So in this early type of occupation with these houses, they didn't take the trash out too far. In fact, they opened the door and threw it out.
Yeah.
So when you find it, and you see this over and over and over again, you see this in homesteads too, right up until the 19th century. In the 18th century and the 17th century, you can find out where the doors are on these sites by the distribution fan of the trash. So they open the door, throw it out.
Jeez. Wow.
Well, this is another piece that was found there. This is a Nottingham, beautiful little piece of Nottingham stoneware, also dating to 1720, 1740, 50. This is a roulette pattern. This would have been a part of a tankard.
I think he did a cartwheel for this one.
Oh, my
He was
God.
excited
The
about
Nottingham is beautiful, and we know it. I mean, it's very diagnostic. Made in Nottingham, England, at this time period. It's a gray stoneware with this wonderful red glaze.
Yeah.
This was also found. It was found a year before, but we put some test pits in this compacted area. This was also found in the front of the building, the north side of the building. This is a creamware, very early creamware, and it's very diagnostic. It's called a Wealden type ware. The manufacture dates on this is about 1750 to 1770. What's really exciting about this is there it is at the fort.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
this is from Fort Pownall excavation. We'll be seeing some of these coming up. Now we can start comparing our ceramics to what they had at the fort. Other material found in front of the house, some nice hand-blown 18th century stemware, very similar to what was at the fort. So they're living in style, they're drinking their wine.
It's the Brits after all.
This is a smoking gun. This is a export porcelain, mid-18th century. Wonderful. The export porcelain was very popular in English and in colonial America at the time. It was into the 19th century, but this is an earlier piece. And we found this piece, north side of the Dickey house or the guardhouse. This is a page from porcelain found at Fort Pownall. It matches.
Is that Dutch?
It's a crane. Now, this is amazing because this is a mile away, so this can't be a refit. However, it does tell me that it's the same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the same pattern going on with export porcelain from Fort Pownall and at our Redoubt. This is personal material that was found that's dated to the period of the fort. This is a jaw harp, and you see on your right, a bunch of them were found at Fort Pownall. And in fact, very, very similar. This one was found by Sarah in the feature fill. So the trench feature that we were just looking at earlier on the south side of the house. Bunch of buttons that dates to the time period. Wrought iron artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
These, I have not seen these artifacts personally. Rick is doing the analysis. He just sent me pictures. I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on them and seeing them personally. So I'm going kind of cold here, but these wrought artifacts, architectural artifacts here, this is a wrought nail. Wrought nails date to before 1790. This could be a shutter. A wrought shutter holder. I'm just guessing at that though. Educated guess. Now going back to the Indian trading post being on that site, we'd expect to find trade items that date to that time period. What's really interesting though, with the fort, we're not finding, and I expect to find them with more work, but we haven't found a lot of military, we haven't found a lot of gun flints, we haven't found a lot of musket balls. To me that suggests that the Redoubt wasn't used very long as a military position. It might have been used only as long as the fort was completed and then it was obsolete. But I have strong evidence that shortly after that it became the truck house. And there's a glass trade bead that was found. It's a rather large bead. They get very small. And it's a black glass bead. It would have been a necklace type bead. Here's another glass bead, tiny. They caught that in the screen, which was really good. We were screening with 1/4-inch mesh. If I do this again, all the beads, by the way, were found in the feature fill. All of them. So it would suggest that stuff is up against the wall. It's not that they were buried with the feature. They were found in there by woodchuck rodent activity. But this material looks like it was up against the wall of the fort. And this is a tiny bead. It was, like I said, it was caught in a 1/4-inch screen. If I do this again, the feature fill, I'm going to screen it with a finer screen because I'm sure there were smaller beads that we missed. Here's a tiny one, and it's hand faceted. Little cuts on it, really crude. Trade bead, glass trade bead. I love these things. Here's a white trade bead. We're also finding cut copper and brass, sheet brass, which is wonderful, and we found a bit of it. Cut copper and sheet brass are wonderful trade items because they're very diverse. You can trade the metal itself in sheet form, or you can cut them yourself and trade. You find this in a lot of the period contact and a lot of the contact period sites of this time. This one is cut and rolled, and it's not finished, but it's rolled into a cone, and what it probably is a tinkling cone, which is a trade item that would have been sewed into material that when the Native Americans would dance, it would make a wonderful tinkling noise.
Yeah.
And tinkling cones are a very common trade item along with beads, and we found that. This was found in the feature fill up against the wall. It's a wrought, tiny, small axe. It would be a hand axe, although it's not an axe, it's a pick. And it's much too fragile to be a excavation pick, but it'd make a heck of a weapon. So possible trade axe, probable trade axe, would really hurt going through your cornea. Okay, we had the occupation of Fort Pownall. We found artifacts associated with that. The Redoubt, we found artifacts associated with trade. That's lovely. What about the Bears map with the 1774 house in there? Maybe or maybe not, Colson. I don't know.
You want me to guess? It was William Carford's place, and that was also where the shipyard was.
This would probably predate the shipyard.
No, the shipyard was, the ship burned in 1770, and the earliest ones were built in 1761, so.
So the shipyard predated.
That was, there was a fire up there.
I thought the first shipyard was built by Hitchborn.
No.
No, we got to talk.
Yeah, but we gotta do a lot of talking.
No, we really have to talk. It's not the time now, but
Yeah.
we got to talk. Shipyard would be wonderful, and we definitely have to talk. This is creamware and plain creamware. I haven't seen these artifacts. These were sent to me. That's not creamware. That's been a mistake. That's a pearlware. That's not creamware. The rest of it is wonderful creamware. This one with a brown kind of speckling on it might be Wilden, might be a little bit older. The rest of it dates really well to the 1760 post 1760s. So this is very suggestive of an occupation, perhaps pre-Dickey. It could also be stuff that the Dickeys brought. We don't know that for sure, but it's suggestive of occupation straight through from 1759 straight on through. And then you have, I'm not forgetting the Dickey occupation, which is there's some very, very fascinating artifacts. They were, like I said, the first post-Revolutionary War settlers in the region. If it was just a Dickey homestead alone, it would be a significant site. But you pile all these occupations up on top of it, it's quite exciting. So that's a tobacco pipe, a really nicely made, 19th century, but hand-painted, a little face. So a high-end pipe, someone's favorite pipe for sure. That's an English wine bottle. When we first found that, we found that in the fill of the round feature under the Dickey house. We thought we were really excited it could be with the Redoubt. Actually dates to about 1790 with the finish. So it's an English wine bottle, 1790, very early Dickey material.
Is that some sort of cork or?
No, it's a finish on the end. It's actually the wine is blown in a case, so it's blown in a mold, and then they apply molten glass around to create the finish. So and by the type of finish, it becomes more and more less and less crude as time goes. This is a hand applied finish, and there's books you can date them pretty. They're pretty good for dating in the site, but we're pretty confident that's an early Dickey wine bottle. And ceramics, even they're really wonderful all the way through for dating a site. This is pearlware, and these ceramics date from about 1795 to 1830, and Dickey occupation, but you're getting a continuous occupation. They're English earthenware ceramics, beautifully made, all hand painted. This one would be on the earlier side, and this one with the blue would be on the later side, 1820, 1830 would be a guess for the production date. And more hand-painted pearlware. Blue is a little bit later. And then you go into the last stages of the Dickey occupation, Victorian period, and you get a lot of that. As the time goes on, as it becomes later in the 19th century, the trash increases because people have more. So more proportionate later material. What's wonderful about this site, it stops there, which it's really wonderful. It's really difficult to pick through 20th century trash to try to get to the stuff and make sense of it. It makes life a lot easier. And this site was used not only for the information, which is what we're talking about here, and the research and the historical significance. I mean, but it's also, I feel strongly that it was that it would be used as a teaching tool, and we invited the whole community out, including Boy Scouts came out to visit. There's Jeff Davis helping out. Harbor Mitchell is down in the hole. He's see the bricks, and actually this is not OSHA approved here, but he's a big guy, so I don't think he could really get hurt. But we use it as an education tool. We use it as a public outreach, and anyone was invited to come and volunteer. And it really was a wonderful time, not just for the site itself, but the whole experience was very positive. And there's a group shot thanking all the volunteers, too numerous to mention. That's looking out towards the bay. That's going across Sticky House, and the trench going across. There's the berm, our beloved berm in the back. This lot is for sale now. And
You want it, right?
well, and David and Sharon, even though it's for sale and they always had plans of selling it, we're trusting enough to open up the lot to be tested, and I have nothing but, I mean, they are, his information and his willingness to open up his property is the reason why we have the information we have. So if this thing sells tomorrow, at least we have this. However, I talked to David Fonce briefly a little while ago, and he's very open. He's very excited about the site, and he's very open to maybe, if things work out, some type of conservation buying arrangement. There are organizations, and there are organizations that can help us out with this. One is called the Archaeological Conservancy. It's a national organization, private, not-for-profit. And their job is they find significant sites and they help, and eventually will give funds. We're also, there may be conservation easement groups that could be worked out and talked to and made interested of this resource. Nothing can be done until the report is published. The purpose of this project last year was to list the site in the National Historic Register, and it's completely National Historic Register eligible. There's no doubt about it. There may be future, once the report's done, there may be future fundraising. There may be, anybody has any ideas, I'm open. This is really preliminary stuff here. The site is fantastic. The carrying place alone, of course, is more than 2,000 years of continuous use. The Redoubt, it looks like the building is there, and it's the very first building, New England, British building, that was built, that opened up Acadia to settlement. It has a lot going for it, and also it's confined. It's within this parameter, this 100-foot parameter, and it's completely within this. What are the odds of taking 100 feet and centering a fortification site in that?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So that's really all I have. We got to get the report done. We're trying to expedite it, and as soon as the report's done, it will be shared.